And that is, if the European intends to maintain power, and the European does, and to exploit the rest of the world as the European does, it means then that the maladjustment of black people, of African people, the neuroses of black people, troubled interpersonal behavior among black people is a political necessity. I want you to understand me well when I say that. That it is politically necessary for black people to be crazy. And we have to start from that fundamental point. Not from mother and child relations, not id and ego struggles and conflicts within the personality, not even the old behavioristic psychology. Because if black people were in our right minds, and if we were in our right relationships, one to the other as people, if these so-called third world people could connect collectively and act as one and recognize their true interests and organize themselves instead of being organized by other people who have their exploitation in mind, this world would not be the way it is today, and the power relationships would not be what they are today. One of the things I look at in this forthcoming book, of course, is how the maladjustment in the black mind functions economically for Europeans. You know, black people are supposedly 12% of this population, right? But they consume about 34, almost 40% of the cosmetics. In other words, the cosmetics industry is dependent upon black people. Interesting situation is, why do we need so many more cosmetics than other people do? Is it because, ladies and gentlemen, we have some trouble with our image and the beauty of ourselves as African people? Is it the fact that a sense of unattractiveness has been so inculcated in us that we try to cover it over with tons and tons of cosmetics and try to change our features and undergo plastic surgery and everything else to try to change our features such that we keep the cosmetics industry alive? When you look at the so-called maladjustments that you can name in the black personality, you will see, if you trace it far enough, that those maladjustments are necessary to maintain economic dominance of other people. In other words, while you're dealing with this sense of ugliness, you enrich Revlon and all the rest of them and impoverish yourself. And do you think then a people whose very lives and economy depends upon a psychological sense of ugliness, a psychological sense of inadequacy, which you try to fulfill by buying clothes and buying a lot of junk and a lot of jewelry and a lot of other crap that we see out here that you use buying inflated sneakers and all this other stuff to try to make up for the emptiness and the sense of inferiority? Do you think that those people will ever rescue you from that state of mind when their very economy depends on it? You must recognize then the functionality of black maladjustment. And whether you're educated or not, that maladjustment is going to stay right in there because it serves the interests of another people. And therefore your study of psychology and sociology and history should not be a matter of just studying group behavior and history and so forth, but it should be a process of understanding yourself. It is not enough this month that you look at your black heroes and look at black civilizations and so forth. You must look also to see how the history of black people, both negative and positive, has created the current mentality of black people, and how other people have tried to create our history and experience in such a way as to create our minds and maintain us in a position of servitude. You will see then every institution in this system is dedicated to that one end, maintaining us in subjugation. And they will be backwards. You look at the corrections or criminal justice institution. There you must find injustice and a lack of correction. The black man must be criminalized because the criminal justice system is an industry worth billions of dollars, and the black man is the raw material that is processed through it, so that a whole lot of people make their living off of it. And he's processed from 12 right on up to maybe 40 or something by the time he's worn out and worn down, and a whole new crop comes in. So the cop gets his piece on the block. The judge, the lawyer, the court officers, and the whole system, all the way to the people who sell electricity, to the prisons, the people who sell food, to people who build the prisons and so forth. Do you really think those people are serious about rehabilitating rehabilitating you when you're so lucrative to their life? You're out of your mind. Do you think an educational system that depends on special education money is going to keep your children out of special education classes? You have to be out of your mind to believe that. Black on black crime. Maybe I'll get a chance to talk with you about that one day. To show how the black criminal, so-called, becomes an ally of the power system. And is used by that power system. I was looking at a program talking about the endangered black man the other day. And you know, and it was interesting, and you had these black professors, you know, they come from the big universities and so forth. It's interesting to watch that crowd too. And you wonder, how did they get there, you know, because often nothing of real interest is said, and you get the repeated stuff you can hear anywhere, but somehow they're there. And then they were lamenting about the fact how when they go to stores, the store doors are closed in their faces, you know. Here I am with my degrees, and I'm going to go to buy a diamond ring, and the white person locks the door and keeps me out, won't let me in. I think even Oprah complained about that one day, if I recall. Said she wanted somebody, they went and called across the street and called the store and let them know they were okay. And when they got back again, they still locked the door in their face. What is going on here? One young man on that program, I think, made the most pertinent statement, which was that being born black, I was born a suspect. And he recognized a fundamental thing there, that every black man is suspect. Every black man is perceived as a criminal. It doesn't matter how well educated I am, how well dressed I am. How often do I feel the fear and intimidation of some people if I get into an elevator with them? And you know, you have to send out a little body language, say, I'm okay, you know, you hold up your times, hey, I'm one of you, you know, something like that. I'm not going to hurt you. But it's degrading in many ways to have one misperceive your personality simply because you happen, so-called happen to be black. But if that is the case, if black men are seen as criminals in the first, as the first impression, it must imply then a need in the other people to see us as criminals. In other words, it speaks to a fundamental psychology within those people. The seeing of black men as criminal must be necessary to their own psychological well-being and their own psychological state of mind. There must be a need in this society to criminalize the black man. So consequently, you see black men who have not even committed a crime being framed and sent to jail. We see this going on all the time. Because, ladies and gentlemen, one of the reasons is that this black man must be taken out of circulation, because this male is seen as the most aggressive of the species, and therefore, if you can intimidate them and lock them up, there are over 200,000 or 300,000 black men in these prisons, and if you can miseducate them, you take them out of competition, and your own status quo and your own position of power is maintained. So consequently, the black male must be destroyed in any way possible. And this is what we have going on. Not only must he be destroyed directly by miseducation, by criminalization, and he must be made an ally of the oppressive system by attacking his own. Yes. And because, ladies and gentlemen, the majority of rapes are black women being raped, not white women. The majority of cars being stolen, the black people's cars being stolen. The majority of houses being broken in, the black people's houses being broken in. The majority of victims of violence from other blacks are other black people, ladies and gentlemen. Even though it's projected the other way around, some innocent white woman being taken by some burly black man. That is not the reality of the situation at all. But that is the image projected. There then must be a need for this other people to project that image. And that need is to create a psychology in our people such that we will not challenge the status quo. So we see then this need to maintain psychological imbalance. How is this accomplished in the black mind? But as I've said before I go to that, you will see a reversal in the institutions. In other words, the criminal justice system will make criminals of black people, no rehabilitation. The economic system will keep you poor. We see a situation like that. Black people within this nation, if looked upon as a nation, would be the 9th or 10th richest nation on this earth. Almost $300 billion black people produce and spend in this country. And yet the black business person doesn't get hardly a nickel of that dollar. And therefore we cannot support our own institutions, our own colleges, and our own universities, and I'll indicate why it is very important for us. We have no control over our economy. We enrich and take care of other people's families while our children starve out here on the street. We have to even induce the criminality of our children by giving our wealth away to other people and leaving them without any wealth. And therefore, they succumb to the temptations of this culture. And some of them then decide that they're going to steal them or take them by so-called illegitimate means. The educational system must make you dumb. Blacks are educated into ignorance. The very process of the education is one of becoming ignorant. When you're educated, you see, because while you're learning something, you're ignoring something else. And if you're being educated along the lines of another people, for the purposes of another people, to the advantage of another people, if that is the knowledge you're getting, then you're becoming ignorant of knowledge that is relevant to yourself. And therefore, often the deeper you get into the knowledge that's laid down by those people, the more ignorant you become. And then you wonder why, despite all of your education and your degrees, we're still in the condition economically, socially, and politically that we are in. And despite the fact we produce more and more degrees, we're still behind in the world because there's something vital missing in the education. The education of black children, we hear this talked a lot about today. This is a structure that needs to be completely uprooted and reoriented completely. But again, as I said earlier, if you don't define what education is and what it's about, you don't see it. What have we got going here? Let's look at New York, for instance. Suppose you educated 95% of black and Hispanic students and educated them in such a way that they could compete successfully with Europeans and others in this city. Think about that for a moment. These people, we black and Latinos, are approaching the majority of the population in this city. We will soon be the majority of the workforce in the city of New York. What would happen then if we educated 95% of black and Latino children such that they could compete successfully against others? You begin to get my drift. You have an economic problem here. You have a situation of either where we would have to bump these other people out of these jobs and cut that train off from Long Island and all the rest of these places that are coming in here. Or the economy of New York City would have to expand to such a degree that it could absorb our children along with the other people. Think about that and think about why New York City seems to have such a great difficulty educating black children. And you will see that they are not disconnected. It is easier to say that your children don't have jobs and are not successfully integrated into the economy by saying that they can't read and they can't write than by saying, well, they're educated and we know they're ready, but we're keeping them out because they're black. So there's an easier political game played there. I say, well, we would let you have it, but you're just not appropriately educated. And so they don't get appropriately educated on the lower levels. And those who so-called get appropriately educated are educated in such a way, with such a value orientation and twist, until they cannot apply the education outside of the system. They cannot bring their talents to the black community. They can only serve the other people. So you got two major forms of education. One that just drops our people out completely or educates them. Another that educates a few and uses them for propaganda and twists their values such that they can be used to maintain the repression of the rest of them. And this is what it's about. And this is the kind you're receiving here too. May as well face up to the facts and see through it. Because if you don't see what you're doing from your perspective as African people, you're being messed up. And we have to recognize that. The black man is recreated because he's separated from his African self. That's the process. I've often said you cannot be an African and a slave at the same time, in a deep psychological sense. You cannot be truthfully and pridefully an African each other as African people the world over and be the dupes and subordinates of European power. It can't happen. The ruling over our people, over this world, has to be brought through a process of false individualism and a process of separating us from our African identity as people. And of course, when you look at the slave experience in America, just don't look at it in terms of how much cotton they had to pick and this and that, or what the slave contribution was to the economy and this and that. Look at it in terms of a brainwashing procedure. Look at it in terms of a personality altering procedure. What is happening to the African during this process? Why is this African losing language and culture and African perspective and African social organization and so forth? What happens to this African as the language and the culture and so forth is being knocked out of him? You will see then an African being niggerized. You will see then an African being turned into a servant. So when you look at that slave period, also read the psychology of brainwashing. Say, I often tell my people who come to me sometimes, you even read the wrong book. Read the books that they don't tell you to read. Because you got to reverse the whole process, you see. Read about the Moonies. Interesting. Why? Read about how and what means they so-called transform personality. Why does the society not like them? It doesn't like any group that appears to get out of its control. And a part of this separation then, and so a part of the process then, is to separate us from our African identity, because if you're in one with your identity, no other identity can be what? Placed in you. It's only when you become separated from your basic identity that you leave room and you leave a vacuum for another identity to be introjected and inculcated in your personality. And in order for the servant to be inculcated in our personality, in order for the inferiority complex to be inculcated in our personality, in order for us to lose our self-confidence, in order for us to lose our pride as a people, in order for us to lose the sense that we can be masters on this earth and not secondary servants to another people, in order for us to lose our ability to act collectively and to relate to each other collectively, we had to first be separated from our African identity. We had to first look for another identity and have that identity projected into us by the people who would use us. Classic brainwashing techniques. Separating and having the individual to reject the old identity, creating a crisis, and then at the price of getting over the crisis, having the individual adhere to new values and new orientations as a reward, and therefore become servants to the person, even the people who introjected the new personality in. And this was done by having us to become ignorant of our culture, make us, and by degrading the African culture, by making everything African, by associating everything African with negativity. This, again, is something you should talk about when you get into the psychology of association, Just don't talk about it the way it's talked about in the class period. Let's look and see what has been associated to the word black. Let's see what concepts have been associated to the word African. And you will see then the associations to African and to black are such that people want to escape from blackness and want to escape from being African. Such that when they say that they are black and they say that they're African, they feel some kind of anxiety and some kind of pain. This system is one such that European power permits it to attach rewards and punishments almost to anything it wants to. And therefore, trying to separate the black man from his African identity, he then loads that African identities with negative associations, such that the African man himself do not want to claim that identity. He wants to run away from it and call himself everything else but an African. I am a human being. We get into abstractions. I am a human being. I am, an American. I am this, anything, but don't call me African. And it is that separation that provides the energy for other people to dominate us. And you'll see that separation taking place in black children and being a part of our creation as a people. We then become alienated from ourselves. We seek to escape our blackness. We don't have time to talk That's looked into a lot of things we complain about in this society. It's even looked into your love life.
Yes, indeed.
I'm telling you. Because when you run away from your African self, you're running away from reality. And the very essence of sanity is being in touch with reality and knowing who and what you are. When you escape your African heritage, and you are whether you want to admit it or not, when you escape your African identity and try to deny that identity, then you are escaping an essential basis of personality. You're removing a major contact of reality, I mean to say. And when a person is separated from reality, they cannot handle it well, and in a sense, they're maladjusted and sick in the world. And they will be defeated by reality. You cannot be separated from your African self. You cannot be separated from your African identity and be in your right mind and know what is really going on in the world. It is impossible. And yet there are many of us who want to be separated. So then, through the association of African things with negativity, we seek to escape Africa. Therefore, we tend to fall in love with anything that helps us to deny who and what we are. You know some of us, when we go to Europe and the French treat us so nice and all that, hear somebody say, I forgot I was black. That's the greatest feeling in the world, when I can forget who I am and what I am about. And so anybody that can make us forget who we are and what we are about can manipulate us any way they want to. Because as long as they keep producing that kind of feeling, we feel good. And we become attached to them because they make us feel good. We even define love in this society in terms of good feeling, don't we? How wonderful we feel, how out of our minds we are. That's right. You mean to tell me you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't do this? Oh, you must be in love. Why should love be something that puts you out of your mind? Why should such a fundamental force be something that makes you crazy? I don't believe true love needs to make you crazy. No. And yet we define it that way. When you look at it closer, you won't be able to find the difference between love for crack and love for another person. And to a good extent, we'll start falling in love with the wrong people because we define that love in terms of how they make us feel. And if we're trying to escape reality and they keep trying to bring us back to it, we'll hate them, even though they are our friends. Those who help us to escape reality and deny who and what we are, we'll love them because we feel euphoric when we've escaped ourselves. And consequently, we'll often love our enemies, you see, because they take us outside ourselves and manipulate. And you can see then the black family often falling as a result of that kind of alienated love. A love based on what? Self-hatred. We're not talking about these black people buying things and supporting other groups other than their own. That is the result of alienation. It means, ladies and gentlemen, that an alien spirit has been introjected into the African personality. Black people, because of their separation from their African heritage and from their African selves, have become possessed by another spirit. As we became separated, another people introjected another set of values and another set of orientations within our breast as African people. And when a possessing spirit is in your breast and in your personality, that possessing spirit serves the master that put it in there, not you. And you can see in the movie The Exorcist, the devil that's in that young girl's personality is there to serve the devil. When you let your spirit be imbued in you by an education that's defined by other people, by an education that's made to suit their purposes, by a religion that's made to define another people with that white Jesus, by other orientations that become a part of your personality and outlook on life, you're going to serve those other people and you're going to work against your own interest. And you see then the evil spirit that has control of a person's personality destroys that person. Hence that person appears to be what? Self-destructive. It makes you want to smoke crack. It makes you want to do every kind of nasty thing that will do damage to your body. Because it gets a curious alien appetite as well. It wants everything that's outside of itself to put in itself to destroy itself. And this is the part of the process of the alienation of black people. And alienated people can only serve whom? Aliens, not themselves. And alienated people can only buy from other people, but not We see it all the time. Because we are here to buy the garbage and the playthings of other people. And our appetites are designed to buy it so that the major position of African man in the world is to be one big mouth, consuming, not producing, consuming. And we even have a bunch of black leaders who think that we can consume ourselves into equality with another people. You can't do it. You have to be productive. You have to produce things to get equality and supremacy. Not buy, not eat yourself to death, not just buy all kinds of junk and stuff. You got to be productive. But an alienated person tries to feed their emptiness, and their whole focus then is upon feeding the emptiness, and they never get around to producing anything. You can sit in this college as long as you want to, as long as you sit here thinking that you're going to get the knowledge that these white people or other people has produced, you'll sit here forever. Because it is until you become producers for yourself that you leap ahead of these people. Because while you're being taught one thing, new learning is taking place. So you'll sit here forever if you think you're going to catch up. You're not going to do it. I'll bring it to a close here. So what I'm trying to say then, the history of black people is related to the psychology, the physiology, the psychosocial experience of our people, and what I call the destiny of the black child is fundamentally different from that of the white child. I alluded to earlier the fact that when we look over this globe, we see black nations in positions of servitude, in positions as producers of raw materials and consumers, but not producers. And yet, regardless of the so-called economic ideology of African nations and European nations and now increasingly Asian nations, and we may as well face this as a fact too, ladies and gentlemen, you may get rid of white domination, but are you prepared for Asian domination as well? Now, this may seem anti-Asian. I want to deal with reality. We live in a competitive world here. And we have to realize as African people, we have to be in a position to compete with any and all other people. That's right. And therefore, the idea that we may be cheering the rise of Asian nations, it doesn't mean that we are out of our situation. We still must stand up on our own feet as African people. It is not our role to switch from the providers of raw materials to the Europeans, only to be the providers of raw materials to other people as well. That's not our role. And we must look at it as it is. What does this mean then? Let's look at it in terms of the fundamental destiny of the education of the white child and the black child. I would say that the fundamental destiny of the education of the white child is conservative. It's a conservative orientation. What do I mean by that? That all this child basically has to do is to conserve the power advantage that his parents have made for it. Right. And to enhance that power advantage over us. And I would argue that the rearing of this child and the education of this child then, you see, is oriented toward conserving and advancing an advantage. When you look at the position of black people in the world, though, I think you will see a different destiny there. I think you will recognize, if you look at it honestly, that the destiny of the education of black children and the rearing of black children is a revolutionary one. In other words, our children should be reared and educated for revolution. Yes, sir. And that's fundamentally different. If we are going to stop our people from starving over the wealth that I mentioned earlier, if we're going to cut this business out of every time we look at a TV, we see some black baby thrust forth as a symbol of starvation and malnutrition, if we are going to gain the benefits of the wealth that our lands provide, if we as black Americans in this country are going to be able to spend more of our dollars that we worked so hard for and are cheated out of to advance the interests of our own people on this soil, we have to educate our black children, our black selves, to take over our own destiny and to revolutionize the world as it is today. And consequently, then, the education and rearing of the black child cannot be some colored duplicate of the education and rearing of the white child, because they're being reared to different purposes, ladies and gentlemen, and to different ends. Your education here should be an education in revolution. a preparation to overthrow this system and overthrow the status quo. That a preparation to rid this nation and this world of black ghettos, whether they be ghettos and as we talk about every day, or they be ghettos and nations. We had the irony of two white men discussing some few weeks ago the destiny of the world. Two people who represent minorities in this world, a minority. And everybody else, all of the people of color, Asians, Latinos, and others, wondering and waiting for these two white men to decide what they're going to do with their very lives. This is a serious situation. How is it that the rest of this world has to sit down and have their destiny dependent upon these two men? How do we know what they talked about in that conference other than the so-called missile treaty? We know at conferences and so forth, many other things that are talked about that are not published. Have they discussed the destiny of African people? Have they decided to remove us from this earth? If they did decide to do so, what African nation is in a position to defend us as people? If these people decided to re-enslave African people, which African nation or group of African people can come and defend us against such an intention, ladies and gentlemen? Things basically have not changed. The European enslaved us in part because of what is referred to as his tools of empire, a differential in military power. Have we closed that gap today as African people? I don't think so. Even though you may have African men flying jets and all of these other things, are we really prepared to deal with the menace that comes from 400 to 500 miles out of space? Are we prepared to fight Star Wars? Are we prepared to go into space? You can buy a magazine right here now called Commercial Space, where people are already talking about the commercialization of space. This is going to be the next colonial period. We're going to colonialize Mars and maybe the other planets. You see articles about mining the moon and mining this planet and manufacturing in the vacuum of space, and a whole lot of things are going on, ladies and gentlemen, out of which we will be left out of if we continue the way we are going, if we do not get into revolutionary education and revolutionary change. We will begin to question whether we will survive through the next century. And that is a major question we have to face. You saw the Star Wars movies? The first one, no black face in it. No black face in it. It had monkeys and all other kind of curious animals flying spaceships. Didn't even have a number 2 black man, you know. Which means that the people who are in control of the future don't even see us in it. They've written us out of that future. And given our state, this is the situation we're in. Some people want to be radical by saying that AIDS is an artificial disease introduced into the African continent and introduced among Africans in America to wipe us out. I say then to that statement, so what? What are you going to do about it? So we do go find some nefarious European scientists who created the AIDS virus and find some kind of system that put this virus into the black community and ultimately set up to destroy African people. What are you going to do about it? Knowing this does not change it, does it? Knowing it does not cure the disease, does it? Not at all. So when we talk about education, you see, this is what education is about. Putting yourself in a position to defend your interests, not just working for other people. Germ warfare may really be the warfare of the future, not bombs and these other kinds of things. How much easier it would be then if we would just plant a blight into the crop and destroy people's food basket, or introduce a disease into the population and inoculate our own against that disease and watch them perish as such. We have to think of that possibility, ladies and gentlemen. And it means this then, that people who do not have the educational base, people who do not have universities and colleges and research institutions and so forth of their own, will not be able to defend themselves against these kinds of incursions. The part of the germ warfare is designed as such. The idea is, can you create a disease with which you can destroy another population and create an antidote to the disease with which you can protect your own? Or can you create a disease and see see how rapidly another nation can create an antidote to protect itself. And you can see there again that this is more of a struggle between institutions and research staff and medical distribution systems and economic distribution systems and so forth. This is why, again, you cannot make it in life depending upon another people's economic systems and another people's health systems and other people's systems. You must develop an economic system of your own. You must be able to finance your own colleges and universities. You must finance your own research institutions because they are vital to your very existence as a people. It is not just about getting degrees and earning a little buck here and there. This education will move you into space and defend your interests as people. This is what it is about. It means then that you have to have a nation. We must develop a sense of nation in this country, black people, because the economic, social development, and political development of African Americans in this United States is vital to the economic development of African people the world over. Yes, and gaining the fullest economic, political, and social power in this country will lead to the advancement of the fullest social, economic, military power of African people the world over. That's one of the reasons why we probably are so miseducated here, because our enemies recognize how vital we are to non-European people the world over. There are other people dying and killing to get the kind of opportunities that we have available to us, even in this discriminating society, black people. When this world is blown up, it will be blown up by educated people, people with PhDs. Educated people, most dangerous people on earth. Yes, definitely. Educated out of their minds. That's a whole other thing that we have to deal with here. But I'll wind it up. Because, ladies and gentlemen, who produces these bombs? Some guy on the block? Who produces these germs and diseases? Some crack dealer? These people can wipe out more life in a fell swoop than these crack dealers and whoever you talk about on these streets could do in a century. And yet we look at them as being the criminals, as the greatest threat. It's the other way around, but I said we have to be turned backwards, you see. People educated into whoredom so they can create any kind of weapon, any kind of thing, as long as you give them enough money and a professorship. They'll create something to destroy themselves, their children, their great-grandchildren, and the whole of the earth, as long as you get them a house on the corner and get them a little position somewhere in the world. What kind of educational system is that? We think as black people that doctors are here to cure diseases. How many of you are aware that doctors also do research in creating diseases? That's right. That MDs are part of the germ warfare aspect. How many people are aware that these bombs come out of Caltech and MIT and the rest of these universities? When we talked about creating the Wall Street Journal ran a piece on the creation of a disease, some 23 American universities were a part of the research of creating the disease. And it was a disease developed out of the Rift Valley in Africa. Dengue fever, trying to make it stronger so they could destroy somebody. Who's involved with it? Doctors? Agriculturalists? You think agriculturalists are only concerned with the green revolution? No, they're going to define bacteria and other things that would destroy crops. You think meteorologists are only concerned with showing you a pretty picture of clouds over the east coast of the United States every evening? No, the ultimate thing, ladies and gentlemen, is to control the weather, to create weather patterns at will. Therefore, we as a people can no longer sit around and let another people have this knowledge and let another people have this information to themselves. We must grasp it, we must control it, we must put it within our own institutions and use it to our own advantage, or else we will perish from this earth. And a part of this then, a part of this destiny of the black child is we must create a national sense within this nation, and ultimately we must create a Pan-African sense the world over. We must be restored to our African selves. We must recognize that our function is not to integrate with an evil system, not to share the pie with an exploitative system, but to bring into being a whole new world order. Thank you, God.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. How many of you would like to have him as your psychology professor? He's absolutely done it. We thank you very much for this very thought-provoking lecture. Just one announcement on Wednesday, starting in March, in room N401. Write this down. Now we have time for maybe one or two questions. I know you have to get to class. So anybody have a question? Yes, sir.
Yes, Dr. Wilson. In the Tawana Brown case, right? What effect is that going to have on her psychological, physiological makeup as a black woman in reference to the white media's bogus assessment of her unfortunate circumstance?
Well, of course, it would be certain I couldn't say to answer that within the exactitude without really.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm
in retrospect to like this has been happening. Black women have always been.
Yes.
Sport, fun.
I'm going to generalize because obviously I can't be specific, not knowing her as a person, because and how this affects her individually is going to depend to a good extent upon her own psychological perspectives and outlooks and self-perception and concepts. Of course, the kind of family and community support she is provided. In the general sense, of course, we have a situation here again in terms of the way this young lady has been treated, and of course other black women have been treated. A situation that if we do not work very hard to change it, would of course underscore the sense of inferiority, the sense of valuelessness of our women as has been projected before. It was a good gesture, I think, in part of Bill Cosby and others to indicate that we as black people value our women, and that we're no longer going to watch them be devalued by the press that puts in doubt her story, puts in doubt her own personality as such. The intention, of course, of that would be, if it were to continue the way it is in terms of the kind of publicity that's built around it, is of course to maintain the image of black people as not being truth-oriented, or as liars, or fantasizing, or to imply that the woman in some way ought to support herself, or the other kind of negative associations that I've alluded to earlier in the speech. But I think this case has been a watershed for us as a people. I can see the actions that are going on now in terms of the demonstrations and, of course, our counter against the propaganda and orientations of the press, the kind of thing Cosby had done and some others. We have reached a point where we are no longer going to let the media and the other people control the slant of information. Once we do that, we will be able to negate and help to neutralize the psychological effects those kind of behaviors against one and others would ultimately have. Because in some personalities, they could really destroy the personality. A person that's been raped, a person who's been abused or violated in that way, many people never quite recover, and many of them suffer for a very, very long time. And their sense of themselves and the kind of things they get into, their maladjustment increases. But I think now with the kind of things we are doing, we can help to neutralize and negate and reduce the negative effects that kind of experience might have put into her mind and personality. It lets us know again, though, that the struggle for the protection of our own individual personality is ultimately a community struggle, that the community needs to support each and one of us, and each of us needs to support each other in the sense of community. In that way, we saw help to ameliorate any problems that have happened to us individually. One of the things I'd say in this book, the forthcoming book, is that often what we see as individual problems are but political, social problems which have been personalized, which we've made and we've individualized. And in a sense then, much of what we think of as problems that are uniquely ours are really problems that are in the political social system itself. And to a good extent then, by changing the political social system, by reinterpreting that system and neutralizing it, we can help to solve many of the individual problems and the problems we think are unique to us just as persons. One other question.
What do you think about the separation of black children because because of the color of their skin, or maybe because maybe one of their parents are white, or from another ethnic group, maybe Jamaican or Ghanaian or something. They seem to have a feeling that they're different than American blacks, that they're not really considered of the African descent.
Mm-hmm. Okay, certainly this is an issue that we need to discuss and work through in this community. Because one of the basis for maintaining the power structure by a minority, as I referred to earlier, is that you minoritize the majority. In other words, you make the large, you reduce the majority to minorities, you see. And therefore, let us say, the Europeans being a minority must create differentiations within the black majority, and that way they can conquer a divided house. So you will find many of us African people achieving our identity not on the basis of our Africanness, but on the basis of our national names. Names given to us often by Europeans. So we identify ourselves as this or identify ourselves as that, not recognizing these are often the names Columbus gave to this island or somebody else gave to this island, and we build our pride around a false name and a false image. And that false identity is used, of course, to maintain this unity within the community. And when we fall victim to it, then we will have to maintain the system that we are in. Those of us who then identify ourselves this way, of course, are helping to maintain the problem instead of solving the problem. That is why ultimately we must see the basic identity of our people as African, as people of African descent. And that is why it is only by looking at it this way that we collectively are going to get out of our situation and our circumstances. This separation is an artificial one. It is one used against our interests. It is one we should recognize as such, and we should get over it as such. We should put emphasis upon our commonality as African people. I've often said the integration that needs to take place is not the integration with whites as much as integration where? Within the own race, within our own race. The assimilation that must take place must not, we don't need it as much outside with whites as an assimilation within our own selves as people. And using that as our base and using our common African descent as our base, we'll be ready to move forward. But as long as we get in and caught up with these kinds of games that you allude to, then neither one of us as a group, whether we're Jamaican or Albanian or this or that, are going to rise to any real position of power or influence in this country. And note again that this is based on, again, that old association psychology, and that is associating Africanness with negativity, such that people then will seek to escape it by attaining any other position. And often the other people will respond to you in terms of those differences. I remember the experience in the South where some black people affected some foreign accent and put on some foreign dress, even prior to the integration of lunch counters, and managed to get into some restaurants because they sound different from the local Negroes. You can see a situation often then that will seek to maintain a division by making some of us feel special, by making some of us feel different. And we want our differentness, even if it's a difference in accent, as a way of maintaining the subordination of the group as a whole. We must not fall for that. I get approached by that all the time. People use the word, well, you are different. You know, if they were all like what? You, then, you know, everything would be all right. If you fall for that nonsense, you're a part of the problem, not a part of the solution.
There was something brought out in the House Beach case that Michael Stewart was saying to the white fellas that he wasn't black. He was, he said he was, you know, from an island. And they were saying, well, as far as we're concerned, you're a nigger.
Yeah, you know, some of us have a very childish attitude. You hear some black people say, I don't look at color. You know, I don't see the world in color. I mean, the person victimized by, you know, in terms of their color, they don't see it. And it's such a foolish, illogical statement. It's sort of like a child that closes its eyes and because it doesn't see, believes it's not seen. And so we often think because we don't see color, the world doesn't see us as colored. And because we don't see ourselves as black, the world is not going to look upon us as black. Foolish, stupid kind of thinking. And so there are some people who think that if they don't see themselves as African, or they don't see themselves as black, they're not going to be treated as black. But that very case itself illustrates that problem, doesn't it? It's like some people who think they get degrees, they're going to be protected. You know, there's this kid that got killed over there in the park. And a lot of people were alarmed because, oh, he went to a white private school and he got a full scholarship to Cornell, as if that would have stopped a bullet. And there are many of us who think because we get degrees that when these people start rioting or go marching against us as people, and this is quite possible, ladies and gentlemen, you've got to think of the impossible. You've got to think of the unthinkable. Integration and true assimilation with another group of people is founded on economic good times. And if those economic situations change, the white man is not going to feed your children before he feeds his own. You must recognize that. But we have this foolish idea that whites are invincible, that they're going to go on forever, that the economy is going to continue to grow. We brought this whole American idea of progress, that things are just going to get better and better. We never think about the other side of the coin, that things could change, that food could get scarce, that the power of this nation can shrink, that the economy can change, and there can be a struggle between groups for livelihood and such. But we're given this fairy tale that once we hold little black boys and white girls hold hands together,